Have you ever wondered what it costs when a hypercar's heart gives out? We're not talking about a few thousand for a rebuild. We're talking about engines that cost more than most people's houses. Today, we're counting down the 10 most expensive production car engines money can buy. And some of these price tags will make your jaw hit the floor. If you're enjoying this, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, because we got a lot of ground to cover. Number 10, Ferrari 812 Superfast, 6.5 liter F140 GA V12. Let's start with something that seems almost reasonable by comparison. Almost. The Ferrari 812 Superfast is already one of the most expensive Ferraris you can buy new, with a sticker price hovering around $350,000. But if you blow that naturally aspirated V12, you're looking at a replacement cost that sits right around $47,000 to $50,000 for a complete takeout unit. That's for a used engine pulled from another car. If you want a brand new one directly from Maranello, the price climbs even higher. Now, why so expensive? Well, this isn't your average Ferrari engine. The F140 GA is a 6.5-liter V12 that revs to 9,500 RPM and produces 798 horsepower. It's naturally aspirated, no turbos, no superchargers, just pure screaming Italian engineering. Every component is built to tolerances measured in microns. The cylinder heads alone are works of art, machined from solid aluminum and featuring variable valve timing on both intake and exhaust sides. And here's the thing. Ferrari doesn't exactly keep these sitting on shelves at your local parts depot. When you need one, it has to be ordered, usually from Italy, and then shipped with all the care and paperwork of a piece of fine art. You're not just paying for metal and gasoline, you're paying for decades of Formula One technology, for hand-assembled craftsmanship, and for the privilege of keeping one of the world's most extreme naturally aspirated engines running. But wait, there's more to the story. The 812 Superfast engine isn't just expensive because of its performance, it's expensive because of how it's maintained. Ferrari demands a specific service schedule, and if you skip it, your warranty evaporates faster than fuel in that V12. The engine has to be dropped from the car for major services. That means labor costs stack up quickly. We're talking 15 to 20 hours of shop time just to access certain components. And if something goes catastrophically wrong, if you spin a bearing or crack a cylinder wall during a particularly enthusiastic drive through the Italian countryside, you're not getting that engine rebuilt at Joe's garage. You're shipping it back to Ferrari, where a team of specialists will either rebuild it to factory spec or tell you it's time for a complete replacement. Either way, you're writing a check with a lot of zeros. The truly wild part is that $50,000 is just the engine itself. That doesn't include the labor to remove the old one, install the new one, and mate it back to the transmission. It doesn't include fluids, gaskets, or any of the ancillary components that might need replacement at the same time. By the time you drive your 812 Superfast out of the shop with a fresh engine, you could easily be $70,000 to $80,000 lighter. So yeah, at $47,000 might sound like a bargain compared to what's coming on this list, but let's be honest, it's still more than a brand new luxury sedan, and that's just to replace the engine in a car you already own. Welcome to the world of ultra high-performance Italian exotics, where even the spare parts cost more than most people's annual salary. Number 9, Lamborghini Murci, 6.2 to 6.5 liter V12. Alright, next up is the Lamborghini Murci, a car that needs absolutely no introduction. This is the V12 wedge that carried Lamborghini through the 2000s, and it did so with one of the most glorious soundtracks ever bolted into a production car. But if that engine goes silent, getting it singing again will cost you around 48,400 euros for an overhauled unit. That's roughly $52,000 depending on the exchange rate. And that's if you're lucky enough to find a specialist willing to rebuild it. The Murci came in two main engine variants. The early cars had a 6.2-liter version making 572 horsepower. Later models, including the LP640 and LP670-4 Super Veloce, bumped displacement to 6.5 liters and pushed power north of 650 horses. Both engines are hand-built masterpieces. Each one is assembled by a single technician at Lamborghini's Sant'Agata factory. That technician's signature literally goes on a plaque on the engine. You're buying art as much as engineering. But here's where things get tricky. The Murcielago is now old enough that many of them are out of factory support. Lamborghini still makes some parts, but not everything. If you need a complete engine, you're usually hunting for a used one pulled from a wrecked car or paying a specialist shop to rebuild your original block. Overhauled units trade hands for around that €48,000 mark. But a truly pristine, low-mileage used engine, those can go for significantly more. And the complexity here is no joke. This is a mid-mounted V12 with variable valve timing, individual throttle bodies for each cylinder, and a dry sump lubrication system. The intake manifold alone is a piece of sculptural engineering. With 12 separate runners feeding each cylinder, the exhaust system is a nightmare of heat management, with catalytic converters tucked so close to the engine that heat soak is a constant concern. Everything is tightly packaged, which means everything is difficult to access. Let's talk labor. To remove a Murcielago engine, you're essentially disassembling half the car. The rear clamshell has to come off, the exhaust has to be dropped, the transmission has to be disconnected, the wiring harness has to be unplugged at dozens of points. You're looking at 25 to 30 hours of labor minimum, and that's assuming nothing goes wrong. If a bolt snaps or a connector breaks, add more time. And specialists who work on Lamborghinis don't charge Honda Civic rates. Figure $200 to $300 per hour. Now here's the kicker. A lot of Murcielagos out there have been modified. Aftermarket exhaust systems, tuned ECUs, headers, intake modifications. If your car has any of that, you might find that a replacement engine doesn't play nicely with your existing setup. You could end up needing custom tuning, custom fabrication, or even reverting back to stock components just to get the new engine running properly. More time, more money. And we haven't even talked about the transmission yet. The Murcielago uses a single clutch automated manual that's notorious for expensive clutch replacements. If you're pulling the engine anyway, it's the perfect time to service the transmission, but that adds another $10,000 to $15,000 to the bill. So your $52,000 engine replacement just became a $70,000 engine and transmission refresh. But despite all that, the Murcielago remains one of the most visceral, dramatic, and theatrical supercars ever made. That V12 howl is worth every penny to the people who own them. And if you're willing to pay $50,000 just to keep that engine running, you're probably not worried about depreciation. Number 8. Ferrari Enzo 6.0 liter F140 BV12. Let's talk about the Ferrari Enzo. This is the car that brought Formula One technology to the streets in the early 2000s. Only 399 were built, plus one extra for the Pope. It was Ferrari's flagship, the ultimate expression of everything the company knew about making cars go fast. And at its heart was the F140 BV12, a 6-liter naturally aspirated masterpiece that produces 660 horsepower and revs to 8,200 RPM. If that engine fails, a crated factory unit has sold at auction for $78,000. Others have been advertised higher. And that's just the engine. No labor, no installation, no ancillary parts. Just the engine sitting in a crate waiting to be bolted into your multi-million-dollar hyper. Why so expensive? Because the Enzo engine is basically a detuned Formula One unit. It shares technology, materials, and design philosophy with the engines Ferrari was racing in F1 at the time. The block's aluminum, the heads are aluminum, the connecting rods are titanium. The valve train uses variable timing on both the intake and exhaust sides. The entire engine is built to withstand forces and temperatures that would destroy a conventional road car engine in minutes. And here's the thing, Ferrari only built 399 Enzos. That means there are only 399 of these engines in existence, plus whatever spares Ferrari might have squirreled away for factory support. Demand is high, supply is extremely limited. When one comes up for sale, collectors and restorers jump on it. That drives the price up. But the cost isn't just about rarity. It's also about what it takes to keep an Enzo engine running. These cars require a major service every 10,000 miles or 5 years, whichever comes first. That service includes dropping the engine, inspecting every internal component, replacing gaskets, checking tolerances, and putting everything back together. It's not a cheap process. Owners routinely spend $30,000 to $40,000 on a single major service. And if something is actually wrong, if there's scoring on a cylinder wall or a bearing starting to show wear or a valve seat is cracked, now you're talking about a full rebuild or a replacement. Ferrari builds these engines by hand. They're assembled by a team of specialists at the factory in Maranello. Each component is inspected, measured, and fitted individually. The pistons are matched to the cylinders, the crankshaft is balanced, the camshafts are degreed. Nothing is left to chance. That level of precision is expensive to replicate. If you're rebuilding an Enzo engine, you need someone who understands the tolerances, the materials, and the assembly process. There are maybe a dozen shops in the world qualified to do that work, and they all charge accordingly. Now let's talk about what happens when an Enzo engine actually fails. It's rare because these engines are over-engineered to an almost absurd degree, but it does happen. Owners who track their cars hard can spin bearings. Owners who skip services can develop oil starvation issues, and occasionally something just breaks. A valve spring fails, a piston cracks, a connecting rod decides it's had enough. When that happens, you're usually not just replacing the engine. You're replacing the engine and inspecting everything else. The transmission gets pulled and inspected. The differential gets checked. The fuel system gets gone through. The exhaust gets examined for any signs of damage from debris. By the time the car is back on the road, you could be $150,000 or more into the repair. And that's on a car that's already worth $3 million or more at auction. So why do people do it? Because the Enzo is one of the greatest cars Ferrari has ever built. It's a piece of automotive history. And that F140B V12 is one of the most celebrated engines in the history of the automobile. When it's running, it's magical. And if keeping that magic alive costs $78,000 for a spare engine, so be it. Number 7, Porsche 991 GT 34.0 flat 6. All right, now we're getting into the Porsches. And this is where things get interesting. The Porsche 991 GT3 is one of the most celebrated track-focused road cars of the last decade. It's built around a 4-liter naturally aspirated flat 6 that revs to 9,000 RPM and produces around 500 horsepower, depending on the generation. It's derived directly from Porsche's GT3 race car engine. And if you need a replacement, you're looking at $85,000 to $100,000 installed. Let's be clear, this isn't a typical Porsche engine. The GT3 motor is a completely different animal from the turbocharged flat 6s in a normal 911. It's naturally aspirated. It has a different block, different heads, different pistons, different connecting rods, different crankshaft, different camshafts. It revs higher, it makes more power per liter, and it sounds like a race car because it basically is one. Porsche builds these engines with racing in mind. They're designed to survive extended sessions at full throttle on a racetrack. That means every component is built to much tighter tolerances than a standard street engine. The bearings are stronger, the oiling system is more robust, the cooling system is more efficient. Everything is optimized for performance and durability under extreme conditions. But here's the catch. If you actually use your GT3 the way Porsche intended, you're going to put stress on that engine. Track days are hard on cars. Running at 9,000 RPM lap after lap generates heat, friction, and wear. And while the GT3 engine is built to handle it, nothing lasts forever. Pistons wear, bearings wear, valve seats wear. Eventually, even the most over-engineered engine needs a rebuild or replacement. And when that time comes, you're not taking your GT3 to the corner mechanic. You're going to a Porsche dealer or a specialist shop that understands these engines. They'll pull the engine, tear it down, inspect every component, measure clearances, and determine whether a rebuild is feasible or whether you need a complete replacement. If you need a new engine, Porsche will sell you one, but it's going to cost you. $85,000 is the starting point. If you need any additional components, transmission work, or if there's any damage to surrounding systems, that number climbs quickly. Labor is a significant part of the cost here. Pulling the engine out of a rear-engine Porsche isn't as simple as unbolting a few mounts and lifting it out. The exhaust system has to come off, the transmission has to be disconnected, the rear suspension components have to be moved out of the way, the wiring harness has to be carefully unplugged at dozens of points. Then once the engine is out, the new one has to go in. Everything has to be reconnected, fluids have to be filled, and the entire system has to be tested. Figure 20 to 30 hours of labor at $200 per hour or more. Now here's where it gets even more expensive. Some GT3 owners track their cars aggressively and opt for additional modifications, upgraded headers, aftermarket exhaust, tuned ECUs. If your car has any of that, you need to make sure the replacement engine is compatible. In some cases, you might need custom tuning or modifications to get everything working properly. That adds more time and cost. But despite all that, the 991 GT3 remains one of the most beloved driver's cars on the planet. That 4-liter flat six is one of the greatest naturally aspirated engines Porsche has ever built. When it's singing at 9,000 RPM, it's pure mechanical poetry. And if keeping that poetry alive costs $100,000, the people who own these cars will pay it without hesitation. Number 6. Lamborghini Aventador, 6.5-liter L539 V12. Next up is the Lamborghini Aventador, the angular jet fighter on wheels flagship that ruled Lamborghini's lineup for over a decade. Under that impossibly aggressive bodywork sits the L539 V12, a 6.5-liter naturally aspirated beast that produces anywhere from 690 to 770 horsepower depending on the variant. And if you need a brand new base engine, you're looking at roughly 85,000 pounds before VAT and labor. Convert that to dollars, factor in taxes and shipping, and you're well over $120,000 before anyone even picks up a wrench. The Aventador engine is special, really special. It's a 60-degree V12 with independent throttle bodies for each cylinder. It breathes through a variable valve timing system that adjusts both intake and exhaust timing on the fly. The intake manifold is a work of art, with 12 individual runners snaking their way into the engine. The exhaust is equally dramatic, with pipes exiting just inches from the engine and routing around the transmission before exiting out the back. It's all mounted longitudinally in the middle of the car, just behind the driver's head, and it sounds like the apocalypse. When you start an Aventador, the engine barks to life with a snarl that echoes off buildings. When you put your foot down, it screams, not in a high-pitched Ferrari way, but in a deep, guttural, angry way that feels like it's tearing the air apart. It's one of the last great naturally aspirated V12s, and Lamborghini knew it. That's why they kept building variants of the Aventador for over 10 years. But that drama comes at a cost. The Aventador engine is mid-mounted, which means accessing it requires removing massive sections of the car's bodywork. The engine cover comes off, the rear fascia comes off, the exhaust has to be disconnected, the transmission has to be separated. And because everything in a Lamborghini is bespoke and hand-fitted, nothing comes apart easily. Bolts are in weird places. Connectors are hidden behind panels. Everything takes time. Labor to remove and replace an Aventador engine can easily run 30 to 40 hours. At specialist rates of $250 to $300 per hour, you're adding another $10,000 to $12,000 in labor alone. And that's assuming nothing else is wrong. If the clutch needs replacing, add another $15,000. If the transmission needs work, add more. If any of the engine mounts or subframe components are damaged, add even more. And here's the kicker. The Aventador uses a single-clutch automated manual transmission that's mated directly to the engine. It's an incredible piece of engineering, but it's also expensive to service. The clutch alone costs several $1,000s, and replacing it requires pulling the transmission, which means you're already halfway to pulling the engine anyway. So if you're doing an engine replacement, it makes sense to do the clutch at the same time, but that adds cost and complexity. Now, why would you need to replace an Aventador engine in the first place? These engines are tough. They're built to handle enormous power and stress. But they're also driven hard. People who buy Aventadors don't baby them. They launch them, they rev them, they track them, and all that stress adds up. Bearings wear, piston rings wear, valve seats can crack, oil consumption can increase, and if something goes catastrophically wrong, like a rod bearing failure or a piston breaking, you're looking at either a complete rebuild or a replacement. Lamborghini does offer rebuilds, but they're not cheap. You're still talking about $50,000 to $70,000 for a full rebuild, depending on what needs to be replaced. At that point, spending the extra money for a brand new engine starts to make sense, especially if you want the peace of mind that comes with a fresh factory unit. And let's not forget, the Aventador is now out of production. Lamborghini has moved on to the Revuelto, which uses a hybrid V12. That means Aventador parts are only going to get more expensive as time goes on. Supply is finite, demand is still high. If you own an Aventador and plan to keep it running, you'd better be prepared to write some very large checks. Number 5, McLaren P1 LM 4.0 liter V8. All right, now we're stepping into truly rarefied air. The McLaren P1 was already one of the most extreme hypercars ever built. Then McLaren went further and created the P1 LM, a track-focused, road-legal version built by Lanzante in collaboration with McLaren. Only 5 were made, and the engine, a 4-liter twin-turbo V8 tuned to produce over 800 horsepower on its own, has been offered on the market as a complete LM spec long block for about $230,000. Let that sink in. $230,000 for just the engine, not the hybrid system, not the electric motors, not the battery pack, not the transmission, just the internal combustion part of the powertrain. That's more than a brand new Lamborghini Huracan. It's more than most people will spend on a house, and it's just the engine. Why so expensive? Because the P1 LM engine is a race engine for the road. It's based on the same M838 twin-turbo V8 that McLaren uses in its road cars, but it's been taken to an entirely different level. The internals are all upgraded, the turbochargers are larger, the cooling system is more aggressive, the engine management is recalibrated for maximum power. This engine produces more than 800 horsepower before you even factor in the hybrid system, which adds another 179 horsepower. Combined, the P1 LM makes north of 1,000 horsepower. But here's the thing. Only 5 P1 LMs exist. That means only 5 of these engines exist in this exact specification. If you own one and something goes wrong, you can't just order a replacement from McLaren. You're hunting for a spare, and spares are basically non-existent. That $230,000 price tag reflects not just the cost of the engine itself, but the rarity and the difficulty of sourcing one. And let's talk about what it takes to keep a P1 running. These cars are unbelievably complex. The engine is mid-mounted, as you'd expect, but it's mated to a hybrid system that includes electric motors, a battery pack, and a sophisticated control system that manages power delivery between the engine and the motors. Everything is integrated. Everything talks to everything else. If one component fails, it can affect the entire system. The P1 requires regular maintenance, and that maintenance is not cheap. McLaren recommends a major service every 12,000 miles or 12 months. That service includes inspecting the engine, the hybrid system, the cooling system, the brakes, the suspension, and basically every other system on the car. It's not uncommon for a P1 service to cost $25,000 to $30,000, and that's just routine maintenance. If something actually breaks, you're in a different world of expense. Let's say the engine develops a problem. Maybe a turbocharger fails, maybe a piston cracks, maybe a bearing spins. The engine has to come out, and removing the engine from a P1 is not a simple job. The entire rear clamshell has to come off. The hybrid system has to be disconnected. The cooling system has to be drained. The exhaust has to be removed. The wiring harness has to be carefully unplugged at dozens of points. You're looking at 40 to 50 hours of labor minimum, and once the engine is out, you need someone who actually knows how to work on it. There are maybe 5 or 10 shops in the entire world that are qualified to service P1 engines. They all have long Waitlist, they all charge premium rates, and they all require that you ship the car to them because they're not coming to you. So now you're paying for transport, storage, labor, parts, and time. By the time your P1 is running again, you could easily be $500,000 into the repair. But here's the crazy part. People who own P1s don't care. These cars were built for one purpose, to be the ultimate expression of McLaren's Formula One technology. They were never meant to be practical or affordable to maintain. They were meant to be the fastest, most advanced, most extreme machines McLaren could build. And if keeping them running cost $230,000 for a replacement engine, that's just the price of admission. Number 4, Porsche 918 Spyder, 4.6-liter 5.8. Next up is the Porsche 918 Spyder, one of the holy trinity of hybrid hypercars from the early 2010s alongside the McLaren P1 and the Ferrari LaFerrari. The 918 is powered by a 4.6-liter naturally aspirated V8 that revs to 9,150 RPM and produces 608 horsepower on its own. Add in the 2 electric motors, and you get a combined output of 874 horsepower. And if you need a genuine spare engine, you're looking at around $342,500, excluding the hybrid components. Let's be clear, this is just the V8, not the electric motors, not the battery pack, not the transmission, not the PDK dual-clutch gearbox, not the rear axle electric motor, not the front axle electric motor, just the internal combustion engine, $342,500. Why so expensive? Because the 918 engine is a work of art. It's a mid-mounted, naturally aspirated V8 derived from Porsche's Le Mans race cars. It features individual throttle bodies for each cylinder, variable valve timing, a flat plane crankshaft, and a red line just shy of 9,200 RPM. It's built by hand in Germany by a team of specialists who assemble each engine with the kind of precision normally reserved for Swiss watches. And it sounds incredible. The 918 V8 has one of the most distinctive exhaust notes of any modern supercar. It's high-pitched, mechanical, and raw. It doesn't sound like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. It sounds like a race car, because it basically is one. Porsche took decades of motorsport experience and distilled it into this 4.6-liter jewel. But here's the problem. The 918 is a hybrid. That means the engine is only part of the powertrain. It's integrated with 2 electric motors, a 7.2 kilowatt-hour battery pack, and a sophisticated control system that manages power delivery between all 3 power sources. Everything's connected. Everything is interdependent. If the engine fails, you can't just swap in a new one and call it a day. You have to make sure the new engine is compatible with the hybrid system. You have to recalibrate the engine management. You have to test every system to make sure everything is talking to everything else correctly. Labor is a huge part of the cost here. Removing the engine from a 918 requires disassembling a significant portion of the car. The rear bodywork comes off, the hybrid system has to be disconnected. The cooling system, which is shared between the engine and the hybrid components, has to be drained. The exhaust has to be removed, the transmission has to be separated, and because the 918 is a mid-engine car with a very tight engine bay, access is limited. Everything takes longer than it should. You're looking at 50 to 60 hours of labor for a complete engine replacement. At specialist rates, that's $15,000 to $20,000 in labor alone, and that's assuming nothing else is wrong. If the transmission needs service, add another $10,000 to $15,000. If any of the hybrid components are damaged, add even more. By the time the car is back on the road, you could easily be $400,000 into the repair. And here's the truly wild part. Porsche only built 918 units of the 918 Spyder. That's it. Less than 1,000 cars. That means there are less than 1,000 of these engines in existence. If you need a spare, you're competing with every other 918 owner in the world. Supply is extremely limited. Prices reflect that scarcity. Now, you might be wondering, why would a 918 engine fail in the first place? These engines are built to incredibly high standards. They're designed to rev to over 9,000 RPM all day long. But they're also naturally aspirated, which means they're stressed. Every time you take the engine to redline, you're generating enormous heat and friction. Over time, components wear, piston rings wear, valve seats wear, bearings wear. And if you track the car regularly, that wear accelerates. Porsche recommends a major service every 20,000 miles or 2 years. That service includes pulling the engine, inspecting every internal component, replacing wear items, and putting everything back together. It's not cheap. Owners routinely spend $30,000 to $40,000 on a major service. And if the inspection reveals that something needs replacing, the cost climbs quickly. But despite all that, the 918 remains one of the most celebrated hypercars of the modern era. It won every comparison test it entered. It set lap records. It proved that hybrid technology could enhance performance, not just efficiency. And that 4.6-liter V8 is a huge part of what makes the 918 special. If keeping it running costs $342,000, that's just the price you pay for owning a piece of automotive history. Number 3. Porsche Carrera GT 5.7-liter 510. Alright, here's where things get truly insane. The Porsche Carrera GT is one of the most iconic supercars ever built. It's a mid-engine, rear-wheel drive, manual transmission screaming banshee that was too extreme for its own time. At its heart is a 5.7-liter V10 that was originally developed for Porsche's Le Mans prototype race car. It produces 612 horsepower, revs to 8,400 RPM, and sounds like nothing else on earth. And if you need a new one, the dealer parts listing shows a replacement engine at roughly $400,000 before installation. $400,000 for an engine. That's more than the original purchase price of the car when it was new. That's more than most people will earn in 5 years. And that's before you pay someone to actually install it. Let's talk about why. The Carrera GT V10 is one of the most sophisticated, naturally aspirated engines ever built. It's an all-aluminum block with a 68-degree bank angle. It features titanium connecting rods, which are lighter and stronger than steel. The crankshaft is fully counterweighted and balanced to tolerances measured in micrograms. The valve train uses variable valve timing on the intake side and a dry sump lubrication system to ensure oil supply even under extreme cornering loads. Every component in this engine is built to race car standards. The pistons are forged, the cylinder walls are coated with a Nicosil layer to reduce friction. The engine breathes through individual throttle bodies for each cylinder, which means throttle response is instantaneous. There's no turbo lag, no supercharger whine. Just pure, linear, naturally aspirated power that builds and builds until you hit the red line and the engine screams. But here's the catch. The Carrera GT was built from 2004 to 2007. Porsche only made 1,270 units. That means there are only 1,270 of these engines in existence, plus whatever spares Porsche might have made for factory support. And over the years, some of those engines have been destroyed in crashes or failures. Supply is extremely limited. Demand is extremely high. When Porsche offers a replacement engine, they can charge basically whatever they want, because if you own a Carrera GT and the engine fails, you don't have a lot of options. Now, why would a Carrera GT engine fail? These engines are bulletproof when maintained properly, but they're also highly stressed. They rev to 8,400 RPM. They produce over 100 horsepower per liter, and they're naturally aspirated, which means they rely on precise tuning and tight tolerances to make that power. If you skip services, if you use the wrong oil, if you over-rev the engine, or if you just get unlucky, things can go wrong. The most common failure mode is bearing wear. The Carrera GT uses plain bearings in the crankshaft, and those bearings rely on a constant supply of clean, high-pressure oil. If the oil supply is interrupted even for a moment, the bearings can be damaged. And once a bearing is damaged, it can fail catastrophically. A spun bearing can destroy the crankshaft, the block, the pistons, and the connecting rods in a matter of seconds. At that point, you're not rebuilding the engine, you're replacing it. And replacing a Carrera GT engine is not a simple job. The engine is mid-mounted, which means the entire rear section of the car has to be disassembled to access it. The rear clamshell comes off, the exhaust comes off, the transmission has to be disconnected, the wiring harness has to be carefully unplugged, the cooling system has to be drained. And because the Carrera GT is a hand-built car with no modern electronic assists, everything is mechanical and manual. Nothing's easy. Labor to remove and replace a Carrera GT engine can easily run 60 to 70 hours. At specialist rates of $300 per hour or more, you're looking at $20,000 to $25,000 in labor alone. Add in the $400,000 engine plus fluids, gaskets, and any other parts that need replacing, and you're well over $430,000. That's more than some people will pay for a house. But here's the thing. If you own a Carrera GT, you already know it's expensive to maintain. These cars are not for the faint of heart. They're not for people who are worried about depreciation or maintenance costs. They're for people who want to own one of the greatest driver's cars ever built. And that V10 engine is a huge part of what makes the Carrera GT special. When it's running, it's magic. And if keeping that magic alive costs $400,000, and so be it. Number 2, Bugatti Chiron 8.0 liter. 16. We're almost at the top. And this is where things get absolutely absurd. The Bugatti Chiron is the successor to the legendary Veyron, and it takes everything to an even more extreme level. At its heart is an 8-liter W16 engine with 4 turbochargers that produces 1,479 horsepower in standard form, and over 1,500 horsepower in the Supersport variant. It's one of the most powerful production car engines ever built, and if you need an OEM replacement, it costs around $856,406 before the gearbox or labor. $856,000 for an engine. That's more than a fleet of luxury cars. That's more than most people will spend on their home. And that's just the engine itself, sitting in a crate, waiting to be installed. Let's talk about what you're getting for that money. The Chiron W16 is not like any other engine on this list. It's not a V8. It's not a V10. It's not even a V12. It's a W16, which means it's essentially 2 narrow-angle V8s mated together on a common crankshaft. It has 16 cylinders, 64 valves, 4 turbochargers, and a displacement of 8 liters. It produces 1,180 pound-feet of torque. It revs to 6,700 RPM, and it will push the Chiron to over 260 miles per hour. Building this engine is an engineering nightmare. Everything has to be perfectly balanced. The crankshaft alone weighs over 100 pounds and has to be balanced to tolerances measured in fractions of a gram. Each piston is individually machined and matched to its cylinder. The turbochargers are custom built and calibrated to deliver boost in a precise, controlled manner. The cooling system uses multiple radiators, intercoolers, and oil coolers to manage the enormous amount of heat generated by the engine. And the engine management system is a supercomputer that monitors hundreds of sensors and adjusts fuel delivery, ignition timing, and boost pressure thousands of times per second. And it's all hand-built. Every Chiron engine is assembled by a team of specialists at Bugatti's factory in Molsheim, France. Each engine takes weeks to build. Every component is inspected, every measurement is verified, every bolt is torqued to spec. And when the engine is finally complete, it's run on a dyno for hours to verify that it meets Bugatti's standards. If it doesn't, it's torn down and rebuilt. So yeah, $856,000 starts to make sense when you understand what goes into building one of these engines. But here's the kicker. That's just the engine. It doesn't include the 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, which is a bespoke unit designed specifically for the Chiron and costs well over $100,000 on its own. Doesn't include labor, which for a Chiron engine replacement is going to be astronomical. And it doesn't include any of the ancillary components that might need replacing at the same time. Let's talk about labor. Replacing a Chiron engine is not something you do in your garage. This is a mid-engine car with an incredibly tight engine bay. The entire rear section of the car has to be disassembled. The bodywork comes off, the exhaust comes off, the cooling system, which includes 10 radiators, has to be disconnected. The transmission has to be separated. The wiring harness has to be carefully unplugged at literally hundreds of connection points. You're looking at 80 to 100 hours of labor, and the only people qualified to do this work are Bugatti trained technicians. Figure at least $50,000 to $75,000 in labor alone. So now you're at $900,000 for the engine and labor. But we're not done. If the transmission needs service, add another $100,000. If any of the turbos need replacing, add more. If any of the cooling system components are damaged, add more. By the time your Chiron is back on the road with a fresh engine, you could easily be over $1.2 million into the repair. And remember, that's just for the engine. That's not even accounting for the rest of the car. Now you might be wondering, why would a Chiron engine fail in the first place? Bugatti builds these engines to incredibly high standards. They're designed to make 1,479 horsepower all day, every day. But even the best engineering has limits. If you run the car hard, if you skip services, or if you just get unlucky, things can go wrong. Turbochargers can fail, bearings can wear, pistons can crack. And when something goes wrong in a W16 with 4 turbos, it can go very wrong very quickly. But here's the thing. If you own a Chiron, you're probably not worried about the cost of repairs. The car costs $3 million to buy new. If you can afford that, you can afford to maintain it. And that W16 engine is the reason the Chiron exists. It's the reason the car can hit 260 miles per hour. It's the reason it can accelerate from 0 to 249 miles per hour and back to 0 in less than 42 seconds. That engine is everything. And if keeping it running costs $856,000, that's just the price of owning the fastest production car in the world. Number 1, Mercedes-AMG One 1.6-liter 5.6 hybrid. And here we are, the most expensive production car engine ever. The Mercedes-AMG One is the ultimate translation of Formula One technology to the road. At its heart is a 1.6-liter turbocharged V6 hybrid that is almost identical to the engine Mercedes used to dominate Formula One racing. And if you need a factory replacement, it reportedly costs around $865,000 thanks to its One-derived complexity and strict service regime. $865,000 for a 1.6-liter engine. Let that sink in. This engine is smaller than the 4-cylinder in a Honda Civic, and it costs nearly $1 million. But this isn't just any engine. This is a Formula One engine that's been adapted for road use. It revs to 11,000 RPM. It produces over 500 horsepower from just 1.6 liters of displacement. It's turbocharged with an electrically assisted turbocharger that eliminates lag, and it's mated to 4 electric motors, one on the crankshaft and one on each front wheel for a combined output of over 1,000 horsepower. Building this engine is monumentarily complex. The block is a stressed member of the chassis, which means it's part of the car's structure. The turbocharger is mounted directly to the engine and spins at over 100,000 RPM. The hybrid system includes a motor generator unit on the crankshaft that recovers energy under braking and deploys it under acceleration. The cooling system is absurdly complex with separate circuits for the engine, the turbo, the intercooler, and the electric motors. And the EDA engine management system is derived directly from Mercedes Formula One program. And here's the truly insane part. The AMG One engine requires a complete rebuild every 50,000 kilometers. That's about 31,000 miles. Every 31,000 miles, the engine has to be sent back to Mercedes, completely disassembled, inspected, and rebuilt. This isn't optional, it's mandatory. And it costs well over $200,000 every single time. Why? Because this engine is designed to run at 11,000 RPM. That's Formula One territory. No production car engine is designed to sustain those kinds of speeds for extended periods. The stresses are enormous. The heat is enormous. The wear is enormous. Components have to be replaced regularly, even if they're not technically broken, because they're operating at the absolute limit of what's physically possible. So when we say the engine costs $865,000, that's not just the cost of the hardware. That's the cost of the engineering, the tolerances, the materials, and the knowledge required to build an engine that can survive in a road car while operating at Formula One speeds. It's the cost of decades of motorsport development distilled into 1.6 liters of displacement. Labor to replace an AMG One engine is a whole other nightmare. The engine is mid-mounted and structurally integrated into the car. You can't just unbolt it and lift it out. The entire rear subframe has to be disassembled. The hybrid system has to be disconnected. The cooling system has to be drained. The wiring harness, which includes connections for the engine, the turbo, the MGU, and all 4 electric motors, has to be carefully unplugged at hundreds of points. You're looking at 100 hours of labor or more. And only Mercedes-AMG technicians trained specifically on the AMG One are qualified to do this work. By the time you factor in the engine, labor, fluids, and any other components that need replacing, you're well over $1 million for an engine replacement on a car that already costs $2.7 million to buy. Now, why would an AMG One engine fail? Honestly, it probably won't, as long as you follow the service schedule. Mercedes has decades of experience building Formula One engines. They know how to make them reliable. But the AMG One is a road car, and road cars get driven in conditions that race cars never see. Stop-and-go traffic, cold starts, short trips. All of that is hard on an engine designed to operate at peak efficiency at high RPM. If you don't follow the service schedule, if you don't warm the engine up properly, or if you just get unlucky, things can go wrong. But here's the thing. The people who own AMG Ones aren't worried about the cost. There are only 275 AMG Ones in the world. If you're one of the people lucky enough to own one, you already know it's going to be expensive to maintain. You already know that this car isn't like anything else. It's a Formula One car for the road, and that comes at a price, and that price is $865,000 for a replacement engine. The most expensive production car engine ever, and that's a wrap. 10 engines that cost more than most people's dream cars. If you made it this far, drop a comment and let us know which one shocked you the most. And if you're somehow shopping for a spare hypercar engine, well, good luck. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more automotive insanity. Thanks for watching.